These are the top 10 must-have commander cards from Bloomburrow.
I'm Mia, and I like cracking my bones.
I'm BZ. I crack my bones all the time. It's probably a problem. It's just, we're very crunchy people. Sponsored by Card Kingdom, because we're the Nitpicking nerds. After all, Card Kingdom's a place you can go to buy Magic the Gathering cards. But if you spend $50 or more, you get free shipping, and you have no problems worrying about your orders arriving 20,000 business days from now, or
20,000 packages.
All in separate packages with 3 of them are wrong. It's all at the same company. They're reliable and they're fast.
They are great. You can get Bloomburrow singles there and sealed product and commander decks. So go check them out. Tell them we sent you. Use our link. We're also sponsored by Dragon Shield, best sleeves in the multiverse.
Good sleeves.
If you use the code
nerds
at checkout, you can save 5% of your real money tax dollars on your entire order, which
like what?
Including the new Spirit Animals sleeve line. This is going to be out August 2nd, and it's absolutely perfect for Bloomburrow. You can see them on screen. They're really, really cute, and I just love the vibe that they give.
They overlap perfectly. We're also sponsored by Moxfield, but not yet. Somewhere in the future, you can try to guess, but you will be wrong. And our Patreon is a great way to support the channel directly because you get exclusive content that you can't get on YouTube, stuff we wanted to make that we just didn't have time to in our regular video schedule, or games we play with our content creator buddies or musical guests. Plenty of stuff on there that you have not seen.
We can also audit your decks. You can make your stinky decks a little bit less stinky with our advice.
Bloomburrow is an awesome set filled with a lot of splashy cards, a cycle of seasons, a lot of kindred payoffs, but we're going to get into some of the honorable mentions from this set. Cards that didn't quite make the top 10 list, but that are still worth keeping an eye on. First, Swarmyard Massacre. It's a 5-mana sorcery. It makes squirrels and then shrinks things that are not insects, rats, spiders, and squirrels, and then it's for each creature you control that's an insect, rat, spider, or squirrel. So if you have 5 spiders and you cast this, you get 2 squirrels, and then everything that isn't one of those 4 things gets -7/-7.
I love this. I love a good one-sided board wipe. I think 5 mana for a one-sided board wipe is an amazing rate, and I bet you're really excited for it. I mean, it slots great into Ishkana.
Yeah, this is a staple for a lot of different creature type decks, but it's really specific. So if you're not playing one of those 4 things, you probably don't care about this. However, spider players rejoice. We got another payoff. Next up, Lily Splash Mentor. 2 blue-green for a 4/4 reach. Pay 1 green-blue and exile a target creature you control. Then return it to the battlefield under its owner's control with a +1/+1 counter on it. Activate only as a sorcery. This is like a combo piece. There's not a ton of cards that do this. There's like Deadeye Navigator, Eldrazi Displacer, each that come with their restrictions of like Deadeye's kind of expensive and Eldrazi Displacer requires a waste. So this is like, even though it is sorcery speed, it gives me like Teamer Sabertooth kind of vibes.
I'm going to be sliding this in Galadriel immediately. I think there's a lot of creature payoffs in there, especially with the entering the battlefield type triggers. So I'm really excited. It is sorcery speed, so that's a little bit of a hindrance, but I'm not too worried about that. And the next card is Sunspine Lynx. 2 red for a 5/4. Players can't gain life. Damage can't be prevented. When it enters, it deals damage to each player equal to the number of non-basic lands that player controls. BZ's going to have to watch out for this, and so will I, because I love my 3 and 4 color decks.
Just a great way to throw around damage if you're monocolored. Also kind of a specific card, so it didn't quite make the list. So we're going to get to the actual top 10 commander cards now. These are all bangers, I think. They're all going to be sweet, and we're going to be seeing a lot of them. So pick them up now, pick them up later, use Card Kingdom, whatever you got to do for it. Number 10, Beza, the Bounding Spring. 2 white for a 4/5. When Beza, the Bounding Spring, enters, create a treasure token. If an opponent controls more lands than you gain 4 life. If an opponent has more life than you create 2 1/1 fish tokens. If an opponent controls more creatures than you, and you draw a card if an opponent controls more cards in hand than you. I guess I got attached to the controls line of text. But this card just catches you up in every possible way when you play it, and it's only 4 mana. So we're also not talking about these cards as commander. These are in the 99. I think this is like a solid flicker card, maybe even just a generic value card if you can get the card back a lot of the time.
I think so too. I think 4 mana is a really good sweet spot for this type of effect, and the stats on this too. I mean, this has decent attacking and blocking stats, but just like the treasures, the life, it does a little bit of everything. And I think that white decks that need a little bit more oomph to stay in like competitive into the mid to late game of those mid casual powers will really like this card.
Yeah, it does play catch up pretty well. I also, the treasure aspect of it, it's one of the only abilities in there that doesn't happen less if you flicker Beza. So like if I have 6 lands and somebody else has 7 lands and I start flickering Beza, I will always get the treasure from that because I'll still be down lands. Unlike where if I'm gaining life, I'll eventually have the highest life, and if I get creatures, I'll eventually have the most creatures. But that one is repeatable, so maybe there's something you can do with that. This card just looks pretty solid. I really have no complaints. It just does a little bit of everything. I think 3 opponents in one game means that you're gonna be behind on at least 2 of these.
Honestly, I think I want to be trying this in my life gain deck because there's also ways to pay life in there, I think that I might try to slot it into the 4 slot. See if the life gain will really help me catch up, I guess, while I'm paying life too.
It also does other stuff. I mean, even if you just have the lowest amount of creatures, or I mean, it doesn't have to be the lowest. It can be the second lowest. You get 3 creatures for 4 mana, which is 6 power, 7 toughness over 3 bodies.
I think that's a really good rate overall. But moving on to number 9, Coruscation Mage. 1 in a red for a 2/2, but with Offspring too, which means you can make a 1/1 copy of it if you pay 2 mana into it when you cast it. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. This can chain together some major damage if you have cheap artifacts or cheap instants and sorceries. I think this can deal a lot of damage overall, and people do not want to be wasting removal spells, especially premium removal spells, on something so small. And it gets around things like Soul Shatter, because this is never going to be the biggest thing, especially if you make that 1/1 copy with Offspring.
Yeah, it's definitely hard to Soul Shatter this. I love it because it's kind of like Gutter Snipe. The end result is whenever you cast non-creature spells, it deals 2 damage to each opponent because you have 2 of them. But it's like very modal. If I really, really need a creature down, or I really need to get the chain started and I can make do with just 1 damage per, then I can just play this as a 2/2 for 2 and save a mana. But if I also have extra mana laying around, I can now create 2 of them, and that means that it's a little bit more insulated against removal than a Gutter Snipe would be because it's 2 different bodies. So it's just harder to get rid of.
I do like how overall encapsulating this card is, because usually Gutter Snipe only hits instants and sorceries and that type of effect, and that makes sense. But this can be used for battles, this can be used for artifacts, and if you're chaining a lot of those together, this can get more value overall.
This might see play in a couple weird decks, like Joyra Weatherlight Captain. This might just go in that deck. Pretty cool. I also love that since we have Offspring, any card that says Offspring, I'm automatically thinking about how do I populate this? How do I get more of them? It's very easy to do. You are red. Red's not great at that, but if you're partnering with basically any other color. Blue's great at it. Green and white can do it, no problem. Black is not a ton of it, but you can definitely get more copies of this and then just start growing the amount of damage everybody takes.
I mean, I'm so happy that they made Zinnia the commander. It has red in it. It's perfect.
Throw this right in the Zinnia deck. We're going to move to number 8, which is Season of Gathering. 4 green for a sorcery. Choose up to 5 paws worth of modes. You may choose the same mode more than once. A single paw. Put a +1/+1 counter on a creature you control. It gains vigilance and trample until end of turn. Notably, that does not target. 2 paws. Choose artifact or enchantment. Destroy all permanents of the chosen type. And 3 paws. Draw cards equal to the greatest power among creatures you control. These seasons are all super cool. I liked every single one of them. However, only a few of them can make the top 10 because there's a lot of cool cards in this set. And this is definitely one of them. There's just so much to talk about with them. Like, obviously, you can play the single paw mode and just put 5 counters on your creatures, give them vigilance and trample, and then swing out if that makes sense for you. What you're probably always going to do with this card is use the second mode at least once and wipe out all artifacts, or all artifacts and all enchantments, which would then give you a free counter to throw on something and get a big attack in. But also, if you need cards, you can just wipe all artifacts or all enchantments and then draw a bunch of cards equal to your greatest power.
I mean, I just love how modal this is. I love the idea where if you have one big creature, you can use a single paw print twice, put a couple counters on it, give it vigilance and trample, swing in, and then also draw a ton of cards for it because of the way they stack. And then, or just choosing artifacts, enchantments, wiping everything and putting some counters. I love the fact that you can just pick and choose, and I feel like this is good no matter what. And it's 6 mana in green, which means I think you could cast this as early as turn 4 if you really wanted to.
Yeah, I mean, I've been a fan of Rishkar's Expertise, Return of the Wild Speaker, even like Soul's Majesty, which is a little bit lower than that. Those cards are all functional, and this just feels like right on par, if not better than most of those. I don't know if it's better than Rishkar's Expertise, but the fact that I get to wipe everything and draw cards, or just build a better creature to draw more cards if I'm not under any pressure, just like this card really does a lot of things. It slices and dices. And that middle mode, I think, is really the best for me. I'm really excited about that middle mode.
I think this one is juicy. I'm really excited to put some of the seasons into my decks. The next one is Agate Instigator at number 7. 1 in a red for a 1/3 with Offspring, 1 in a red. Whenever another creature you control enters, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. This is a Perforos type impersonator, but I like the fact that it is yet again modal with the Offspring. I do like the fact that it can equal 2 damage overall if you need it. I like the fact that if you Offspring it, it triggers itself once, so you will get at least 1 damage among everyone, and just 2 bodies overall. It might really actually matter.
Yeah, I mean, I know Perforos is indestructible, and it's probably like it's a little bit different than this card, but I think it's a pretty good comparison because 4 mana for what Perforos does is a pretty good rate. If Perforos just didn't have indestructible, I think people would still play that card. This is like, okay, great. You get to pay 4 mana. Now your creature is split up into 2. They can't just remove it. They can't just exile one of them. There's still going to be another one. And when you offspring it, the token triggers the first one and then gives you a first round of damage for free.
I just really like this card. I mean, I have a Peripheros deck, so of course I'm going to put in. But, like, Krenko Mob Boss, like, will absolutely love this card. Anything where you're making a bunch of little guys, even Balmor might like this card if it goes cheap enough.
Yeah, it really could. I think the modality of the offspring just gives you even more choices. I can play this as basically a better impact tremors. It's now a creature that I can recur or flicker or save from removal or whatever. It's like basically impact tremors, but you just get a bunch of stuff stapled onto it. Like, I'm so here for this card. It's a pretty simple card, but I'm glad it exists, and I think it's going to go in a ton of decks.
I think so too. The next card is Ral, Crackling Wit at 6. 2 blue-red for a 4 loyalty planeswalker. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you put a loyalty counter on him. +1, create a 1/1 otter with prowess. -3, you draw 3, then discard 2, and you -10. Draw 3, you get emblem with instants and sorcery spells you cast have storm. That's incredibly powerful, and I don't think it's actually that tough to get to.
So I was thinking about Ral, and I'm like, oh, it seems like he's kind of got a similar thing going to Teferi, Master of Time, because he just kept plussing over and over, and he gets you the ultimate pretty quick, and the ultimate is backbreaking. This has the backbreaking ultimate and has the ability to give you extra loyalty, not really dependent on untapping with this. It just says if you cast stuff, he gets more loyalty. So I was trying to think of like a good scenario. You definitely don't want to play this card on turn 4. That's, as far as I can tell, not what you want to do. I think what you want to do is you want to play Ral +1 to 5, then either on your turn or before your next turn, cast 2 spells. That will put him up to 7, which means when you untap with him, you only have to cast 3 more non-creature spells to bring him to 10, to then ultimate the turn after you cast him and basically win the game. I mean, his ultimate is completely amazing. It is so unbeatable if you have any spells to cast at all, and he fuels you by letting you draw 3 right away. So even if you were empty-handed, you're still off to the races. Plus, in that scenario that I crafted, you cast 3 spells already, and then you ultimated him. So now whatever you cast is going to get at least 3 copies of it. I think this is very real. Just don't cast it on turn 4. I think if you did what I said and cast it maybe on like turn 7, plus spell, untap on turn 8, and then just win the game.
Yeah, I definitely think that is doable, especially if you are playing a lot of spells like we do, like the Frantic Search types, where it's like refunding you the mana, or you're playing mana rocks. If they're sitting in your hand a little bit late game, but you have enough card draw, you could be playing them and adding to this and then fueling yourself for more mana. So if you can just like chain together a bunch of cheap spells, you know, your Preordains, your Git Probes, your Mishra's Baubles, you know, all the stuff that BZ really likes to play, I think that it's doable to do 10 within the turn.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to try this card out. I think it's pretty strong. This feels Teferi, Master of Time-esque. Maybe Teferi's a little bit better, but who cares, right? Ral's really, really cool, and it goes in a completely different deck than Teferi. So I definitely want to try him out. I think it might be one of my new favorite like storm win conditions. I feel like it does a little bit of everything. It also just protects itself by giving you a chump blocker. I think that's pretty important in terms of like you can put the shields down a little bit if you know what the board looks like and you know that maybe only 1 or 2 creatures will get to attack Ral. Making that otter could be a huge difference.
I feel like the best planeswalkers always have a way to protect themselves. That's the deal with Teferi, for instance. I mean, if you can phase out a creature, of course you can keep activating. That's the biggest part of protection, and having a little bit of a chump blocker, not bad, especially if you are planning to cast a bunch of instants on other people's turns to bring him up to that +10. You might be able to make that otter bigger and bigger, keep something like close to the chest, and then actually take out other people's creatures if they try to attack with them too, because the 1/1 isn't threatening in, like, you know, as a base stat.
Yeah, so let's go to the next card, which is actually Moxfield.com. Get bamboozled. I said there was an ad. It's right now. Moxfield is the best deck building website. We use it all the time, and it helps us parse out, oh, what new cards are from Bloomburrow in this set? I can sort and create and tag and turn any number of knobs, any number of ways on Moxfield in a way that no other deck builder I've been able to find has been able to do.
I love Moxfield. It is so easy to build with that. As soon as the cards are up on Scryfall, they go immediately onto Moxfield, and that's like within the hour of them being released. So if I need to update my deck, I go immediately there, and it is so fast. I love it.
Moxfield's great. You gotta use Moxfield. You gotta follow us on Moxfield and get over there. And we're gonna get to number 5, which is a land. It's Fountainport. Taps for a colorless, or you can do a bunch of stuff. You can pay 2 and tap it and sacrifice a token to draw a card. You can pay 3 and tap it and pay a life to get a 1/1 blue fish, and you can pay 4 and tap it to create a treasure token. There's just a lot going on here. But I think we need to check the base again. The base is an untapped land that makes colorless. So what is the opportunity cost? You lose out on a little bit of fixing. Every deck can only have so many utility lands in it. But what do you gain? You gain the ability to repeatedly draw cards, create chump blockers, because unlike a lot of the other cards in Bloomburrow, this fish token does not enter tapped. It also just puts tokens onto the battlefield if you care about that for something else. And if you're really desperate, that last mode might look bad, but it's kind of tacked on for free. I'm sure if I really need an extra mana, I'll just make a treasure token.
I really want to try this in Edgar because I wasn't even looking at the bottom two. I read, okay, untapped land, and then 2, sack a vampire, sack a junk, whatever you have, sack a clue if you make those, draw a card. That is incredibly powerful. Card draw is really hard to come by, especially in the Mardu Orzhov colors, and getting it stapled onto a land. If I'm willing to pay 3 mana and like 3 life for War Room, I am easily happy to pay 2 mana plus this, and then also maybe some sort of token that I make for free.
Yeah, if you're any kind of token deck, you can pretty much forget the last 2 modes and just say, wow, this is a card draw engine on a land that I will happily activate whenever I have the extra mana, whenever I need cards in my hand. Plus, if you're a token deck, great. The last 2 modes, they make tokens, depending on what type of tokens you need. If you've got treasure synergies, this could be good. But also, I'm just looking at it. It just does a lot. It's not busted by any means. But the ease... But it's so easy to include this card in so many decks that this card is going to be one of the most played Bloomburrow cards, not close.
I mean, move over, Reliquary Tower. This is the new colorless land that I want to see in a lot of decks.
Look, honestly, I think in a blind scenario, I think you could probably just cut Reliquary Tower, A, in general, and B, for this card most of the time. I don't think Reliquary Tower actually does that much. I'd so much rather have this in almost every deck, unless there's some specific, corner case where you desperately need to have no max hand size so you can draw up to 20 cards and then Windfall or something. That's obviously a different thing. But I think Reliquary Tower kind of overplayed. Fountain Port should be overplayed, or it should be very played, and then it would be appropriately played. Does that make sense?
I think it makes sense. Number 4 is Polywog Prodigy. 1 and a blue for a 1/3 with Evolve. Whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell with mana value less than its power, you draw a card. I think that this can be really good. I think this will start building up and getting you a lot of cards over the long game, and I think people won't see that it's a threat until it's too late.
I think this card gets better the higher power games you play. So in the highest possible mode, if you evolve this once, it's going to draw you a lot of cards because there's a lot of spells that cost 0 or 1. I think the real key that you really, really want to do, you need to get this thing to 3 power, either through just playing 2 creatures that have more than 1 or 2 power to evolve it twice, or just put an equipment on it, or put 2 counters on it from something else that you have. Once you do that, I think this thing's going to get so much advantage. Whenever anyone plays a Signet or a cheap removal spell, you're just going to cash in for value, and it's not one of those cards that's optional or anything. It just happens. This thing's going to accrue so much value just over the course of the game. And if you're playing against me, you don't even have to evolve it because I'm going to be playing Mishra's Bauble.
You really will. Getting the turn 2 potential card draw down just really early always feels like you're setting yourself up for better games overall because you just have that engine. People probably aren't going to be removing it just as a targeted thing at least. And just, I don't know, it's like the Ledger Shredder type deals, you know, the Archivist type deals, that good 2 mana slot.
It's perfect.
I always feel really good about playing these cards.
It's perfect. It's a way to use your mana and store it up so that when you continue to play the game and advance your board, now this thing develops into a huge threat that is not necessarily the most obvious thing because they know when you're going to draw a card and they have to basically be okay with it. They're like, all right, I'll cast a Signet and you draw a card. And I don't think it really is going to come up on everybody's radar as much as it should. It's going to be a sneaky good card. I think Polywog Prodigy is awesome. And it's not like it's a really specific card. The spider, rat, insect board wipe, that's very specific. This is do you play blue? Can you put counters on this or play creatures that have more than 1 power? Great. I mean, your opponents are going to do the rest. They're going to trigger it for you.
I also love the fact that it's not just limited by once per turn, which I feel like a lot of cards nowadays are. I feel like they let loose a little bit with this one, and it's going to be a very good card overall because of that.
Oh, it's got that Ristic Study thing that you are worried about where, your opponents can go, it's fine. I need to cast all these spells. And then all of a sudden, you just win the game because of one person not threat assessing properly.
It's not as sticky as Ristic Study, which I'm a little bit happy for, but it is a very good card overall. This is just going to be a very powerful effect on the board.
Next up, another powerful effect on the board. Number 3, Season of Loss. Choose up to 5 paws. You can choose the same mode more than once. Single paw, each player sacrifices a creature. Double paw, draw a card for each creature you controlled that died this turn. And triple paw, each opponent loses X life, where X is the number of creature cards in your graveyard. Another card that just kind of never does nothing. It slices and dices, and no matter what stage of the game you're in, if you're in the very early stages and you find yourself extremely far behind, everybody sacrifices 5 creatures is basically just going to be a board wipe. That's great for you. If you're in the middle stage of the game when you're kind of spinning your wheels a little bit, you're trying to get a hold of something, then just choose each player sacrifices 3 creatures. And then now that you sacrificed creatures before this, you sacrifice 3. And the number of cards you draw is going to be greater than that because you specifically this turn had creatures die before that. So this could be like each player sacrifices 3, I draw 6. And then there's the last mode where like if you're in the late game and you're trying to close the door on the game, oh, you've got 20 creatures in your graveyard? Great. Each opponent loses 20 life, and maybe you sacrifice a few creatures first.
I have a Mahadi deck that is no rares, and I wish I could put this in because it would be so good in there, but if you have a Rakdos Sacrifice deck, this is going to be amazing. If you have Liliana Dreadhorde General in your deck, this is also going to be amazing in there. I feel like this has so much utility. Black, you want to sacrifice stuff anyways, so you're going to be getting so many death triggers with just 6 mana of things. I love this card. I'm very excited to see this. Plus, card draw, we all want more cards.
Yeah, some of the graveyard decks can be a little bit slow to close if you're not playing some of those cards like Living Death or Rise of the Dark Realms. So if you don't have that, I think sometimes it can be a little bit of a slog. But this is exactly what I want to see, where it's a non-combat way for graveyard decks to close out the game in a way that doesn't feel cheap. You have to earn it. You have to fill your graveyard, do the thing your deck wants to do, and then great, you put 20 things in there. Time for the game to end.
I love the fact that this is sneaky, too. I love that people can't really see it coming, right? Like, it's not, like, stapled onto an enchantment where it's like, if you have 20 things in your graveyard, everyone loses 20 life. It's like, no, this is just a one sorcery that you slap down, everything dies because you can get people to sack a bunch of stuff, and then, oops, guess you guys have to lose 20, lose 15.
You reminded me, I think, of Mortal Kombat, because it's like a 6-mana enchantment, and I think it says at the beginning of your upkeep, if you have 20 creatures in your graveyard, you win. That is pretty dubious. It's also, yeah, like not really doing any help for you synergizing or fueling your deck. This has other modes that do exactly what your deck wants to do. You want to draw cards if you're trying to filter through your library to find something else, and you want to sacrifice creatures and make everybody else do it because you've got the most expendable creatures at the table. Season of Loss is going to dominate. It's going to decimate people. It's going to make people feel like they probably should have quit the game, I think, in some scenarios, because I know we are big fans of the sacrifice. Accursed Marauder, Plague Crafter, Flare of Malice, Soul Shatter, like we play all those cards a lot, and you can just see the light leave someone's eyes when they tap out for a 5-mana commander or a 4-mana play that doesn't affect the board right away, and we just kill it almost accidentally by also killing other things. They just feel like they're dead. And this is going to do that.
It feels like they wasted their turn, and this is going to get you so much more value, especially if you are playing in those types of pods where it's tap out pass, which I feel like a lot of battle cruisery pods are. This is going to just sweep the entire board and set yourself up in a way better position where especially if you have a bunch of expendable creatures, you can just be drawing for that and then also just happen to be getting rid of the rest of your opponent's creatures.
Or if it's turn 10 or 12, you just fireball them for 20. I love it so much. It's like A++ design. It's amazing. What is our number 2 card?
Our number 2 is Lumra, Bellow of the Woods. 4 green for a star, Vigi, reach, power and toughness equal to the number of lands you control. When it enters, mill 4, then return all lands from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. Note, this does not have to be out of the cards that you milled with Lumra. This is just any land that you have lying around in your graveyard. I can see why this was one of the most hyped cards from the set, and I hope it comes down in price so I can put it in my $100 Euro deck.
This card looks absolutely absurd. I am going to play it so much. It is a back-to-back sort of graveyard card. But if you just have a lot of fetch lands in your deck, I don't even think you need to be specifically a graveyard deck. If you're playing fetch lands or even Evolving Wilds, Myriad Landscape, like that kind of thing, if you have a lot of that going on, this could even do work in a budget deck. I'm not saying this card's going to be budget, but I don't think you have to play Misty Rainforest to make this card busted. It even fuels itself if you've got Flickering. If you're just a graveyard deck in general, you're going to get like 5 lands back with this. That's ridiculous. That puts so much resources on the side of you. That puts so many resources on your side of the battlefield that it doesn't matter what happens to Lumra. Sorry, Lumra. I really just care about the trigger. Having a 12/12 is just a gravy. If they kill it, I can recur it and maybe get more lands back. But it's just insurmountable advantage over time that there's no way to answer it because lands are very sticky. We're not going to be seeing Armageddon. That's not going to happen.
Whether you're on a Field of the Dead mana base like type of budget or you're on the $100 Euro type budget, I'm ready to play this with like the hideouts from Streets of New Capenna and the Terramorphic Expanses. I don't care because that's just so much value for me when they come back to the battlefield even tapped. That'll set me up better later. This will get to be gigantic. It'll fuel itself to mill. And overall, it's just like if I can sacrifice those, do it again. Walk the Aeons. If I can sack some islands, bring them back, sack it again. Like,
Yeah,
this
I
can
mean,
just fuel itself.
Like, what is the worst case scenario for this card? You have one land in your graveyard, you play it, it mills 4 cards, you're at least 30% chance to hit a land each time you mill a card. So let's say you hit one land, you get a 6 mana 8/8 that puts 2 lands into play. I mean, that's still good. I don't know. That's still a good card.
And then like 3 more into the graveyard, so you have a little bit of. You're able to recur if you have those effects.
Yeah, it puts other cards in the graveyard too. It's not like even if you, in this scenario where you only hit one land, you still mill 3 other cards too. It's just so much gravy.
Overall, it's just so much advantage, and I really like this card. Maybe we'll have to slot into a bunch of decks.
Not maybe, it's definitely happening.
But the number one, I need like 3 copies of this card. It's 3-Tree City. When it enters, you choose a creature type because it's a land. You tap it to add colorless, or 2, tap it, choose a color, add amount of mana. That color equals the number of creatures you control of the chosen type. As I alluded to before, I love token decks. I love making little creature tokens, and this is going to be a staple in any deck that needs those.
Yeah, this is a pretty simple one to like explain or review because remember Nykthos? And remember how that card is a complete staple in every single monocolor deck or every single 2-color deck that is heavier on one color, or even every whatever color deck if you've got a lot of pips of a certain color. This is just that, exactly that, except it's creature types, and there's even a few little differences where now the color that I choose has nothing to do with the creature type that I chose. So if I want to choose goblins, I can still make blue mana. That's not going to always come up, but it is worth noting that you can, like if you're a spiders deck, you got a bunch of green spiders, you can make black mana to cast black spells.
I really like this because in vampires, for instance, I need a lot of black mana, but there are some with like, there's a few that I'll need white pips for, and that doesn't really come up that often. But if I have 10 vampires and they happen to be black and red, I can still cast my white vampires, no problem.
Yeah, this thing just, I mean, it is an absolute staple. You said you needed 3 of this card. You need 3 of this card. I know you do. Every single person who has ever built a creature type heavy deck just needs this card. I think it's a completely amazing card. I'm happy we have it. I'm happy we have a card like this for the Kindred decks. I have no notes. 10 out of 10. I know I'm going to need it for my Spiders deck.
And just not even mechanically, but this comes in the 4 Seasons art, and I really want the fall one because I love the red colors.
Okay, I might need the winter one. That's pretty cool. Oh, man. 3-Tree City, you need 4 of them. We need 4 of them. That's just how it is. It's an amazing card. Get ready to see it every time you sit down against a Krenko Mob Boss deck.
But if you want to see another video talking about Bloomburrow, we review every precon right about here.